Hi guys, my name is James. Some of you might know me. I don't get on this meeting as much as I'd like to, because I'm selfish, self-centered, and I'm busy with school and stuff. What can I say? Um, well, I'm an alcoholic, and as far as Steve saying that he didn't really have to do too much. That's, from my perspective, not very true at all. I needed a lot of help. I needed a lot of help, and um, that's primarily because, like I said, I'm an alcoholic, and um, I had to know why I was an alcoholic first of all when I first got into this solution and in this book. Um, it told me a few really important things about myself that I did not know, and one of them was, why am I the way I am? Why was I in the position? Why was my life unmanageable? Why could I not drink like other people? Why couldn't I just have a beer and stop? Right. Um, and I had to learn a few things, and you guys, I'm sure, have gone over them in steps 1 through 3. Um, but I'll gloss over them really quick because today I'm really going to try to talk about step 5 and really 4 too, because I think you kind of need a lot of understanding of step 4 to know why and how you do step 5. I mean, really, all of these steps are related, right? And they're done in order for a reason. So I'm going to probably jump around a little bit, but my primary, purpose is to try to, help the alcoholics who's still suffering, but also to kind of talk about steps 4 and 5. Okay, so why am I an alcoholic? Well, I I don't react the same to drinking any mind altering substance. I don't react the same as a normal person might, and that's because, as outlined in our book, I have a physical allergy to this stuff. Um, it I don't break out in hives necessarily. I can't stop like other people. Once I take that substance in, I'm off and running. Some people call it going on a run. Some people call it, in the book they talk about going on jags, right? Some 1930s funny language. But the point is, I just can't do it like other people. Um, and once I take that into my body, right, it sets off a phenomenon of craving. Um, I can't stop. I start thinking about it. Even when I'm away from alcohol, if I manage to separate myself for any amount of time, I'm still thinking about it, right? I have a mental obsession over it. And that'll always eventually lead me back into the cycle of drinking. And very quickly, I forget anything around me except for the bottle, right? Or whatever else I choose to put in my body. And I don't give a shit about anyone in my life. I don't really care about, simple things like my health. I don't care about a job. I don't even care about, the woman I might love at the time, right? I tell myself I do, but I don't. I become extremely selfish, self-centered, and I tend to bring down everything around me. So if it seemed like I kind of gave up easier, to somebody like Steve, and he didn't have to prod me too much, it's because I was thorough. I did a good job of destroying everything around me, right? Like I was lost when I got here, right? I had that gift of desperation that the book talks about. So that's the only reason. I was blessed with being a really good alcoholic, I guess, right? A really thorough one. So that when it came time to let go and give up and do what was suggested, I didn't have any other options. I just didn't have any other options. There was no fight left in me at that point. That's not entirely true. I sat on my 4 step a little bit, but I digress. So I learned I was an alcoholic because of that physical allergy, right? Um, and we talk in step 2 and 3 about being powerless, our lives being unmanageable, and that we quickly learn through reading that we need something outside of ourselves, right? If I don't have power over my own life, well, not over my own life, to go on without alcohol, I can't defeat this disease by myself. And I've proven to myself over and over again that other people, any other human power around me, right? Because I went to an outpatient program, right? I took prescribed medication to try to cure me of alcoholism. That didn't help me. It didn't help me. None of that helped me. I was in an outpatient, and I would leave there and go right around the corner and drink with a nice homeless lady, right? Immediately after that, I would test dirty all the time when I, had been busted, and I was on probation. Just nothing worked. All these humans that tried to help me couldn't help me. I couldn't help myself. So I needed something greater than myself. It's a pretty simple concept. So if you go to page, let's say 60 in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we read this in meetings all the time. Says our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after. And I always like to, when I'm talking to sponsees, I say, well, before and after what, right? Because they're clearly talking about something there. So our description of what an alcoholic is, we agnostics, that chapter, and it says our personal adventures before and after. Well, before and after what? Before and after these 100 original alcoholics worked a solution and found a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience. That's what they're talking about before and after, all right? So those experiences before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, which is step one. B, that probably no human power, I would remove the word probably in my experience. No human power could help. Could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. So, that's steps 1 and 2 right there. So we're at step 3. And I'm not going to go over step 3 too much, although it's important. But it says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And once again, over and over and over again, I've proven to myself that my own will, right, which I just, kind of define as my thinking, right? Because a will, like if you make a will when you die, what you're making is a set of directions for somebody with what to do with your stuff, right? Well, my set of directions come from my thinking, right? All action is born in thought. So when I see will here, I usually correlate that to my own thinking, right? The way I think of the world, the way I view things. And when it says self, that I correlate to something my sponsorship line talks about a lot and goes into detail, and that's instincts, right? They're just, my instincts that help me survive in this physical world, right? You have, your social instinct that makes you want to have relationships with other people. We need each other, right? We're a social, species on this planet. We definitely need other people for relationships, for protection. It's a natural thing. We have our sex instinct, right? Our sex instinct is pretty self-explanatory. Humans have sex for pleasure and or reproduction. It's another instinct that we need to survive on this planet. And then we have the security instinct. All of us need that ability to feel safe, whether it's through money, some shelter, we need food, things like that, right? That's our security instinct. And you can break those down further. So when I see a life run on self-will can hardly be a success, that tells me that self, so my instincts, and my will, my thinking, so a life run on thinking just about satisfying my base needs, is probably not going to be a success ultimately. If all I'm concerned about is getting things, whether it's money, a girl, a car, whatever it is, if that's all there is to my life, so far that hasn't worked for me. And I think, a symptom of that is very clear in a real alcoholic, because we're in a way trying to satisfy all those things through drinking. It's not that they're bad. It's just that they can quickly become out of control, and without some guidance from something besides myself, something greater than me, I'm probably going to fuck it up. Okay. So we make a decision in step 3, and we're on step 4. And on the bottom of page 63, we kind of begin step 4. At the very bottom, it says, next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. And I always like this beginning here because, first of all, it has some immediacy to it, right? There's not a delay between step 3 and 4. At least that's how I read it. I know some people do this differently. They might, do one step a month or something. For me personally, I would have been drunk a long time ago. I just celebrated 5 years this month, and there is no way. Thank you, I appreciate it. There's no way that would have happened if I delayed this stuff too much. Not for me. Some people might be able to get away with it, but I could not. And about that 5 years, somebody asked me they were like, hey, when you woke up, and it was 5 years, how did you feel? Did you feel different? And I answered them honestly, and I said, no, I don't feel any different. And the reason is because I continue to work the solution all the time. So I've been recovered this whole time. The whole time I've been sober, right? I've been happy, joyous, and free. I'm not perfect. That's not what I'm trying to say at all, right? Happy, joyous, and in particular, free. And it's from working the solution. So I just want to say that. The 5 years is amazing. I'm very grateful for it. But it doesn't happen for me without this. It doesn't happen if I didn't launch out on a course of vigorous action. I also think this sentence is interesting because they say the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. And I always thought that was interesting because the personal house cleaning is step 4, and he refers to it as step 1. And that tells me the importance of these steps, right? Because this is the first step of action, right? This is the first time I'm putting pen to paper and I'm doing something about the problem I've identified, right? In steps 1 through 3. I've made a decision to do it, right, in 3. And now this is the first step of actually doing something, which is why so many of us don't want to do it, in my opinion. That's why I sat on it. I don't want to do anything, right? We alcoholics are undisciplined. I just wanted to drink. I wanted people to leave me alone. And well, I got the alone part. The drinking stopped working for me. Said, many of us have never attempted this. True. So we get on to step 4. And what are we doing in step 4? It's a personal inventory. And Bill was a businessman, so Bill very much compares this to a business. He said, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. True. I was literally broke, and physically, spiritually, I was broke all around. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods. So what's the difference between a sellable good and an unsellable good? I've worked at grocery stores quite a bit. When I first got sober, I worked at one for like 3 years, and they always had me do inventory there at the grocery store. And part of your job, you're counting everything. You're taking inventory. You want to know what's there. And the big reason you do that is you want to identify things that are expired and need to be cast out, right, and gotten rid of and thrown away. And you want to identify the things also that are selling really well, right? So you can make better use of the room you have in the store. And that's exactly what we do in step 4 with ourselves. An unsaleable good or a saleable good adds value to me, right? Something unsaleable adds no value to my life. So I want to identify what's working and what's not working. The stuff that's not working, I'm getting rid of. And we want to get rid of them promptly and without regret. if the owner of the business is to be successful, he or she cannot fool themselves about values, right? So I can't lie to myself, which will bring us to step 5, because I think that's another way, we'll talk about it, but in this book, it talks about a solitary self-appraisal being insufficient, right? So if I just did step 4 and I skipped step 5, if I'm just looking at myself, I'm writing down things, how honest am I really going to be? Right? Let's be honest about being honest. Me personally, I'm probably going to gloss over some things. And for me, that may be a fatal mistake. If you drink like I drink, I was desperate to do whatever I could do to stop that. So we need to be thorough. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, and once again, self is that word, right, that I think defines our instinct, right? Just me, right? Myself is just some people call it ego. That's fine. I break it down into, these instincts because it really helps me understand exactly what's going on. I think it's a way to, Bill elaborates on that, by the way, in the 12 and 12 for step 4. He talks all about instincts. And they're in column 3, I believe, in the actual inventory process. So, so just my instincts manifested in various ways, right? That's what defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. So out of living life just based on, these basic needs and trying to fulfill myself that way, things become manifest that aren't necessarily good for me. One of them is resentment, right? Give you an example. So I had a resentment against my boss when I first started working, when I was out of rehab. And the resentment was that I worked really hard, and why didn't he appreciate me? And why wasn't he just giving me a raise? Right? Why? Because my material instinct was threatened. I needed money, right? My pride. I thought that he thought less of me because he did not give me a raise. It turned out that I could have just asked for one, and I did, and everything was fine. But I assumed, he should just know how important I am, right? But there's just an example of how a resentment manifests itself if I'm just worried about myself, right? And what I can get out of the situation. Resentment is the number 1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. And I think it's important to talk about what a resentment is, because when I first started, I was doing this, I didn't understand exactly what it was. I assumed resentment meant like you're mad. And that's definitely true of resentment, quite a bit. But really, the origins of the word just mean resentiment, right? The word sentiment is an emotion, right? We're typically usually not talking about a great emotion, one that feels good or anything. And means again. So all the resentment really is something that I feel over and over and over again, and I can't let go of. And letting go is a huge concept in this solution, right? I have to be able to let go of things. Once again, a resentment is an unsellable good. It does not add value to my life. If I want something, I feel like I'm not being treated right, or I wanted a raise, I need to take action on that and speak to my boss. Holding under resentment does nothing to me. It causes me to treat that person worse, possibly create a harm, right? And that stuff will lead directly back to the bottle for me. I know it because I've proven it to myself over and over and over again. So on page 65, we actually see the inventory, as outlined. And I talked about the instincts being a huge part of column 3, and probably the real root of our troubles, or at least living purely based on that stuff and not considering anything spiritual or anybody else in my life. So you can see a good example of it. My sponsorship line does this in sort of an Excel like spreadsheet format. I think I've showed you guys, I did a thing on step 10 before. Let me see if I have this here. So if you guys can see my screen. So this is kind of how we do it, and it's right out of the book. It's just put in a format that kind of look. Alcoholics are undisciplined, right? I certainly am, and if you can put something kind of just directly in order for me in the book, these columns are already there, and I can just fill them in. It helps me. There's some definitions in this packet that I use with sponsees and that I did myself when I did my 4-step, but you'll see the example, right, from the big book. And then just the same thing, I'm resentful at, right here. The same 3 columns, the cause and affects my, right? These same columns, right? And you'll see over here, Bill talks about sex relations, which we have right here. In column 3, there's self-esteem, which we have on there. Security, the security instinct. Personal relations, self-esteem again. Pride's on there. So it's the same thing. It just helps me to check these boxes so I can see exactly, where I'm disturbed. And when you do original 4-step, we don't just do resentments, right? We inventory, this is how my sponsorship line does it. We inventory fear as well. Harms. Some people argue you don't inventory harms necessarily. I disagree. Here's fear. Same thing. And then we'll have harms, right? And then we'll also have a sex inventory, which Bill spends time on page 69, funnily enough, maybe had a sense of humor, talking about the sex inventory. So we go through this and we do step 4. Because we want to see where our desires have warped us, right? We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. And like I said, I think those 2 words are really important, and they tie into step 5. So that's something to remember, right? Thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. God, they were wrong, weren't they? I used to think I wasn't such a resentful person until I did a 4-step, and it turns out that that I do. I warp my resentments in a way. I have such pride that sometimes I'm convinced I don't even get mad at people for things. I just try to dismiss them. But it turns out I can be a pretty resentful person. And so I had quite a few of those on there, and that surprised me. A lot of this stuff surprised me because I'd never taken a good look at myself before. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent, and uses the word precise, extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. So I don't know if you guys have ever had a resentment against somebody and something prevents you from talking to them, or you just can't let it go, and you waste a lot of time on that. I've always heard the very good comparison that a resentment is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die. All right, there's only one person that's hurting, and that's usually me. Now, the problem with that, and why we inventory harms, is because resentments typically, if left untreated, lead directly to harms, in my opinion. I've done it to people in my life. I don't like what they've done for some reason. I'm burnt up about what they've done seemingly to me, and I usually lash out on it at them, right? Then what happens? They retaliate, and then it's a giant mess. So we review resentment, harms, fears, and you have this list. Then we get to into action, which is chapter 6. And here's where we start talking about step 5. And I know I'm supposed to talk about this for 45 minutes. I don't know if I'm going to go that long or a little bit longer. I'll do my best, Luis. So we get to step 5. And once again, why are we doing step 5? Like, I've already done this thorough inventory. Hopefully it's thorough and honest. Why do I even bother? Why do I need to talk to somebody else? You know, like, I know what I've done. I know what's been done to me. I know what I'm afraid of now, kind of. I know, I see my resentments. I start to see some issues maybe that I have, maybe some patterns in there. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. I think it's important to emphasize that it's a new attitude and a new relationship. There's plenty of people that work this solution that may have been religious before, or at least were spiritual in some capacity. I always, had an inkling that there was something greater there. When I was younger, I used to talk about spirituality, but that quickly moved away when I started drinking. I became to be a little bit bitter toward the whole concept, right? Just thought it was dumb, right? It wasn't intellectual enough for me. And I just thought it couldn't really be right. But either way, even if you have a prior knowledge of a higher power, we're being told right here that we want a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. And like all good relationships, it takes some work. A relationship is a two-way street. So it's not just, it can't be one way. So I have to remove the stuff that's blocking me from a higher power. If I want that higher power to come into my life and help remove this mental obsession over drinking and using, and help me with my alcoholism, I better move some stuff out of the way. Because I've learned through doing this program that God's always been there. I'm the problem. I'm in the way. These things are in the way. So I better be able to unbury this stuff and get rid of it so that I can let the sunlight of the Spirit come in. And if you're new to this stuff, it may sound like some hocus pocus. And I want to make a little disclaimer. Like, I'm somebody who's pretty logical. I'm a science major. I'm trying to go to school to be a scientist. And I can tell anybody straight to their face that this is real. It's real because it works for me. It's happened to me over and over again, where the sunlight of the Spirit, my higher power, has helped me in situations that I couldn't help myself. There's no doubt about that for me. So I want this new relationship. And to do that, it tells me right here, I have to discover the obstacles in my path. I've written down some of these obstacles, and I've admitted certain defects. I've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is, and I've put my finger on the weak items in my personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part. He uses that word a lot, right? This book uses action quite a bit, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and here's step 5, to another human being, the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. And this is a very true statement. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. So me personally, I remember very clearly doing my 4th step when I finally, got it done. I was in an inpatient rehab at this point, and my sponsor came to do my 5th step. And I went down sick that day. All right? I went down sick that day. Oh, I was sick, all right. And the reason is, I didn't want to do the 4th step, first of all, because I didn't even want to write down some things. I didn't even want to see some of the things, right? And I certainly didn't want somebody who was basically a stranger, to see any of this stuff either. So I chickened out. And thank God that person stuck around and said, okay, let's reschedule, and came back, right? Because I did it. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There's doubt about that. And that's true, because I told myself I wasn't going to write certain things down. somehow I had enough room for God, and God told me to write these things down. And then somehow, even though I told myself I would never tell anybody else, I had just enough room for a higher power that pushed me to do that and let go and take step 5. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. So here we go. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. I also want to talk about the word humble. I always thought that that was a bad thing, right? Like, why do I need to be humble? And if you look at the root of that word, it comes from some Proto-Indo-European and really Greek roots. Humus, right? That's the Greek root of that word, and it means ground, grounded, or earth. So once I learned that, I realized something, that this is about me being able to shed this stuff. Bill talks about being an actor in this book quite a bit. So I'm shedding a lot of this stuff. I'm becoming grounded. I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be. I'm becoming present. I'm becoming somebody that's here by being humbled. Almost invariably they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. So it tells me here that my house cleaning is the first step, right, of action, which is the personal house cleaning, which is step 4. And if I don't do step 5, I'm not completing my house cleaning. So those 2 steps are linked. They took inventory all right, but hung on to the worst items in stock. They only thought they lost their egoism and fear, and they only thought they had humbled themselves. And remember, my thinking is the issue here, right? If I'm just guided by self-will, so just instinctual based thinking and nothing else, nothing spiritual, my thinking's messed up. And I can see that when I do my inventory, because I've caused a lot of problems. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all of their life story, right? And that's italicized, the word all. You might as well get it out now if you're going to do this stuff. And you know what? It turns out the whole world's not going to collapse if you do. In fact, you might find some relief from it. It may change your life. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He or she is very much the actor. To the outer world, we present our stage character. This is the one that I like other people to see. I want to enjoy a certain reputation, but I know in my heart that I don't deserve it. This is the main reason I think step 5 is so important, right? I can't, if I do this thoroughly and honestly, which are the requirements for step 4 and 5, then I can't be an actor anymore. There's nothing to act about if I'm admitting some things I don't want to admit. It's just me and another person. I'm showing them who I really am, and that's frightening to do. It's also extremely important spiritually and a key step in getting over my alcoholism. To the outer, oh, I just read that, sorry. The inconsistency is made worse by the things the alcoholic does on their sprees. Coming to their senses, they are revolted at certain episodes that they vaguely remember. Anybody have stuff like that happen to them? Man, I have. These memories are a nightmare. And listen to the fear that we talk about in this passage. Revolted, nightmare, tremble, fear, tension. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. And there's the plug that blocks me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. And we didn't necessarily go over it, but the book also tells us that God is found within. That's the only place God is found. So unless I remove this stuff that I push deep down inside myself, I'm never going to be able to find that higher power. He hopes it will never see the light of day. He's under constant fear and tension that makes for more drinking. And I'm going to skip this. We talk about psychologists. We're rarely honest with anyone. The next paragraph, but if you go down to the bottom, we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. Bill will suggest religious leaders, if you so choose, a close friend. But I think through reading these passages, we'll understand that another alcoholic does very well, perhaps better than any other person to take the fifth step, because of the requirements that they outline here. At the bottom of this paragraph on 74, it says, of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. Who better to understand an alcoholic than another alcoholic who's worked this solution and knows what it's about? I'll give you a good example too. Those things I was afraid to talk about in step 5, I talked about them on my 4th step. And my sponsor at the time, some of the stuff that I was so afraid to talk about, my sponsor laughed a little bit at it and was like, yeah, me too, man. Me too. And suddenly I realized, like, man, I'm not the only one that has issues like this, right? I'm not the only one that's done this stuff, right? And it's had this stuff happen. I'm not the only one. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a close-mouthed, understanding friend. So you want somebody that can be, confidential, because you're not trying to harm others by some of the stuff getting out, or and it tells us right here, we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy, right? So maybe this taking step 5 isn't recommended with, your significant other or a parent, because odds are a lot of this inventory stuff is going to be, they're going to be on that, right? I don't want to necessarily disclose something that's just going to harm somebody else so that I can feel better. That's not what this is about. It's another reason why I think an alcoholic who has worked a solution works so well. Thank you, Keegan. Sorry. Now, they also it does talk about possibly postponing the 5th step if we find good reason for it. I think that was more due to the fact that we don't have the amount of people available now that can hear a 5th step. I would never postpone it if I possibly could. If you're like me, once again, I've said it before, I'm getting drunk. I'm waiting for an excuse to get drunk, as a matter of fact. So if you give me an out, if I see a tiny crack of daylight, I'm going for it. So there's no need to postpone any of this stuff. In hindsight, it's never as bad as your fears make it up to be. It's never as bad as that. When we decide who's to hear our story, we waste no time. Here again, we're talking about doing it quickly and thoroughly and honestly. We've written an inventory and we're prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. This person should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approaching this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. And here's the actual step, right? And some of the promises, the 5th step promises. We pocket our pride and go to it. So we set our pride aside. And our pride is just what we think other people think of us. That's all that is. It's just what I think other people think of me. And remember, my thinking's messed up. That's the problem in the beginning. So I need to put that aside. We illuminate every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we've taken the step, that's a condition. I'm going to get a promise. Once we've taken the step, withholding nothing. Those are 2 conditions. I've taken the step and I've withheld nothing. I'm delighted. I can look the world in the eye. I can be alone at perfect peace and ease. I have a sponsee right now who talked about being so afraid and getting out into his own apartment after rehab. And he said, "What am I going to do when I'm all alone? When no one's there?" And I said, "Oh, would you like to be alone at perfect peace and ease?" Because it turns out that's what this program's about too. And I can take him to page 75 and be like, "Okay, this is what you want. This is the promise you would like to have. It comes with conditions." We take step 5 and we withhold nothing. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. So that power greater than me that I need so desperately to get over my alcoholism starts to come in. I start to feel it. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. And here's the beginning of where the difference between an agnostic and what happens to somebody like me when I do this stuff. An agnostic is just somebody who doesn't know. That's literally what that word means, right? Gnosos, Greek for knowledge, and ag, whenever you have that in the beginning, that's not. So I didn't have the knowledge yet. So it's not about belief. Suddenly I start to know, and that's a difference. And to this day, when people ask me if I believe in God or I believe in a higher power, I tell them, no, I know. It is different. It's a different thing. I have a relationship with something greater than myself, provided I do what I'm supposed to do. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. And here comes the hour. I correlate this to step 5. Some people say it's step 6. For me, step 6 starts more when he's talking about step 6 on the next page. But this I say is part of step 5 too, and it's a pretty important part. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, so we literally bust out our big books. We turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, which I think is 59. It's 59. Okay. So we're going to look at page 59. We're going to read the first 5 proposals. We ask her if we have omitted anything. So this is the solution's way of making sure, okay, we're starting to feel the nearness of our Creator. Are we sure we've been thorough enough? Right? I don't want any hangups later in my life. Right? I don't want to be where I'm at now 5 years down the road, and then all of a sudden something that I didn't talk to and admit to somebody else, something I didn't inventory, comes back and I don't know how to handle it. Right? Some people who maybe do this program that aren't working a solution thoroughly talk about how life just happens, and man, life still, I hear people saying some funny stuff sometimes. God bless them, but life is out almost to get you, right? And I would argue that some people that still think that way maybe have some stuff they still haven't gotten off their chests. But carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk free person at last, right? At last. If I want to be alone at perfect peace and ease like my sponsee wanted, I have to be free, right? Instead of restless, irritable, and discontent, I'm working a solution so that I can be happy, joyous, and free. Right? That's the antithesis of the stuff I was before. I get to be the opposite. Free? Are you kidding me? I was trapped. I was trapped. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And now I have a solution that's telling me I can be free. Freedom from the bondage of self. That struck a chord with me, and I haven't let go of it because it saved my life. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? I don't want this whole structure I'm building to collapse on me. So I got to be thorough and honest. I have to be thorough and honest. So the hour is the solutions way of me looking back at what I've done. We all need times to reflect. And we have a time right here, I think, right in the middle of our step work and working a solution where it's like, okay, you're starting to get this relief from the bondage of self. Are you sure you're ready for the rest of this? Are you sure you are doing everything in your power to get out of the way? And you consider that stuff. And I tell my sponsees to literally read those questions, right? And to go back over their inventory and be sure that they have everything down. Steve tells a famous story about how during his hour, he realized there was something he left off. And that's the perfect time to do it. And then he went over it with his sponsor. That's what that hour is for. I think I've talked long enough about this, because the next part is step 6, right? We're going to actually make sure we're ready and have this stuff cast out in 6 and 7. But I just wanted to go over 4 and 5. Hopefully I didn't talk too long. I appreciate you guys for listening, and hopefully you got something out of it, and you can pass it on to somebody who really, really needs it. You know, a dumb alcoholic like I am. So thank you guys.
Thank you, James. I will stop that recording now and